Nuclear agreement with Iran is in jeopardy this weekend after President Trump announced that he won't certify Tehran's compliance with the deal. His decision comes despite the global nuclear watchdog, as well as US and European officials, though, saying that Iran is keeping its side of the bargain.
We will not continue down a path whose predictable conclusion is more violence, more terror, and the very real threat of Iran's nuclear breakout. Importantly, Iran is not living up to the spirit of the deal.
The move then now means that US Congress has 60 days to decide whether or not to reimpose sanctions against Iran, as well as to come up with new legislation to try and amend the nuclear deal. But if those negotiations fail, Trump says the deal will be terminated, which risks undermining the fragile balance the nuclear deal has secured. Here's why he might be considering ripping up that agreement.
4 reasons why Trump needs to pick a fight with Iran. After all his policy flip-flops, he needs to stand firm on something. Iran will do, just to save face.
Threat posed by Iran, whose chief exports are violence, bloodshed, and chaos. All nations of conscience must work together to isolate Iran.
Washington's also getting worried by Iran's growing influence in the region.
Iran has been allowed to run wild throughout the Middle East for the last 8 years.
But let's not forget money. Iran, the evil enemy, helps to sell a lot more weapons than Iran, the compliant partner.
Tremendous investments into the United States, and our military community is very happy, and we want to thank you.
And the cherry on top, bashing Iran means pleasing a close friend, Israel.
Common danger that the Arab world and Israel face from Iran.
For decades, Iran has fueled the fires, threatening the region and causing so much violence, whether it's soldiers, whether it's money and guns, it's Iran.
I want you to know how much we appreciate the change in American policy on Iran, which you enunciated so clearly.
The former Supreme Allied Commander of U.S. forces in Europe, General Wesley Clark, said that in the course of a couple of visits to the Pentagon, he was informed by people in the war room that they had been ordered to draw plans to overthrow 7 Middle Eastern countries within the next 5 years. One of those was Iran. Taking on Iran is an enormous challenge, and I think it's an enormous threat to both Russia and China. I don't think the American people would support it, and I don't think it would succeed.
Well, for the Iranian president, he's responded to Trump's claims by saying that it's not up to any single leader to make a decision about what, in effect, here is a global agreement.
This is an international multilateral deal that has been ratified by the UN Security Council. It is a UN document. Is it possible for a president to unilaterally decertify this important international deal? Apparently, he is not in the know. It is not a document between Iran and the US, so he can't treat it the way he likes.
It, in fact, took 9 years of tough negotiations before that deal was finally reached back in 2015, although the standoff over Iran's nuclear activity stretched way back more than that, more than a decade, and was widely regarded as one of the world's most urgent crises for a long time. It wasn't only the US that painstakingly negotiated the terms either. It was the combined efforts of Russia, China, Britain, France and Germany too. The US Secretary of State tried to rally European allies over Trump's decision, but they've mostly reacted angrily.
I fully expect that our allies and friends in Europe and in the region are going to be very supportive.
The President of the United States has many powers, not this one. It is not a bilateral agreement. It does not belong to any single country, and it is not up to any single country to terminate it. We cannot afford, as international community, as Europe for sure, to dismantle a nuclear agreement that is working and delivering, especially now.
This is a difficult and, in our view, dangerous signal. The agreement with Iran has shown for the first time that it's possible to prevent war through negotiations. The destruction of this agreement would mean that others around the world would no longer rely on such treaties. It's therefore a danger that goes far beyond Iran. We in Europe, Germany, France, the UK and the EU, we stand by this agreement with Iran. We want to preserve the agreement.
I think it will further estrange our relations with our European allies. It will draw them closer together, and I think actually closer to the Russians and the Chinese. As things stand now, the Iranians have the support of the Russians, the Chinese, and all of our European allies, and it's Washington that is isolated.